You are listening to Geeksterilia's podcast. Hey there, Geeksters! Welcome to Geeksterilia's podcast, your favorite podcast about movies, series, and literature with sci-fi fantasy themes, but also about pop culture in general. My name is Cecilia, and today is a special day because we have a very, very expected, well, at least expected by me topic, which is a very, very classic movie from the 80s and also a very, very classic movie about time traveling. And today I am joined for another by another fellow bilingual podcaster here in the border from El Paso, Texas, Sam Butler. Hi Sam, how's it going?
Hello. Good, doing good. Thank you for having me on your podcast. It's wonderful to be here. I love the subject matter. I think it's going to be awesome. I can't wait to
Yeah.
get into it.
Well, that trilogy is awesome. It,
Yes.
it is, like I said, it's a classic. It's a classic. Also in pop culture, it's a strong references in most any other movie, and also reference, as a time traveling movie. So
Yeah.
we can't skip
Yeah,
it
we're
and
talking
talk
about
about
Back to the Future.
it. We
Back
are
to the
going to talk
Future. Yes.
Back
Awesome.
to the Future. Back to the Future.
Yeah, I was
Fun
like the
fact.
time traveler's wife. No, not that one.
No, not that one. Not that
Not that
one.
one. Back to the Future.
Also, not Dark the series from Netflix. No, that's not
Yeah.
it.
No, 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 not it. I like it.
Okay, well, guys, to the guys that are watching live, welcome, welcome.
Hello.
Uh,
Hello. What's up,
I'm
guys?
very happy to have you here. And from what I know, these guys were watching Frozen One. They were having a watch party of Frozen One. So hi to all the
Wow.
bunch. And they finished just in time to join us. So that's pretty nice. Okay, so Back to the Future. But before we dive into the topic, Sam, why won't you tell our audience what do you do and what is your podcast about?
All right. Well, nice to meet you guys. My name is Sam Butler. I'm a stand up comedian. That's what I mostly do. I do stand up comedy in English and Spanish. I work a lot in the United States doing English stand up comedy and Spanish stand up comedy, which is unique because the Spanish stand up comedy movement is growing in the United States. And I'm fortunate enough to be one of those guys that happen to be at the right place at the right time, and I'm getting picked up by all these big artists moving into the U.S. and I'm able to kind of work with them and do the shows in Spanish. But I also work in English, and I've been doing stand-up comedy now for about 11 years. I'm going on my 12th year, and I mostly work in the Los Angeles market and a little bit in the East Coast, New York. But I'm a road comic as well, so I do a lot of shows around the country. I drive to a lot of my gigs, and then I started working in the Mexican market and Latin American market. So I do stand up in here in Ciudad Juarez, and I do stand up in Mexico City and different cities around Mexico. I just did a right before COVID hit. I did some shows in Guatemala, so I'm starting to kind of expand into the Latin American market as a stand-up comedian. Well, once COVID hit, I started my own podcast, like a lot of us did, you know, and
Yeah.
I really didn't know how it was going to go, and I decided I wanted to do something that was a little different. I didn't want to do like a long podcast, so I did a 15-minute. That was like the whole focus of my podcast. How can I do a podcast in 15 minutes? And then a buddy of mine told me that the average person, that there's a company that was looking for content, and they were looking for content that was 20 minutes or less because they'd done some research and found out that the average person sits in the bathroom for about 20 minutes on their phone. So I said, perfect. That's my podcast. So my podcast is called The Shit Podcast, and it's the podcast you can enjoy while you're taking or when you have some free time, you know.
Yeah.
And it started in Spanish. The whole concept was let's just do a 15-minute podcast in Spanish, and I'm I like knowing weird random facts. You know, I've been uh, in construction my whole life, so it's always good to kind of know things that you learn a lot of things. So people always told me, hey, you have a lot of weird facts, you know, stuff about. Why don't you know? Where do you learn this stuff? So I decided, okay, now I'm gonna do it as a podcast. So the podcast in Spanish is called Sta Cagado con Sam Butler, and I evolved into the Shit Podcast with Sam Butler, and then I also do a podcast on cigars, and I have a co-host, Luis Munoz, um, and he's a sommelier, so we talk about cigars and what drinks you could pair with it, and that's pretty much all I do as far as this is concerned. You know.
Yeah, as I mentioned when I introduced you, you are one of the few people that are doing a show both with both Spanish episodes and English episodes. So high five!
Well, yeah, high five. We got this.
Yeah, high five!
Yeah.
Yeah, this is one of the things from that you get from living in the border. So yeah.
Yes. It's great. You know, I was really surprised how many of the Mexico City stand-up comedians, that community, there's a lot of people in Mexico City that speak very good English,
Hmm.
and they're happy to be on the podcast, and they're also happy to watch the podcast. I get messages from people all over Mexico asking if I can come to their classroom and visit with their students because they teach English as a second language, and it's like, wow, I would love to do that, you know, just go visit with them and have conversations. I think that's such a unique opportunity that has come from this that I had no clue would ever happen, you know.
Yeah, yeah. And you know what else is an advantage from living in the border? Having a great
Yeah,
taste in art.
yeah, check that
With that.
out, guys. Yeah.
Oh,
That's awesome. I'm at I live in El Paso, but when I come to Juarez, I usually have a lot of stuff scheduled for the weekend. So I have a pretty nice friend that gives me a good deal here at this. This is actually one of the nicest hotels here in Ciudad Juarez. It's Maria Bonita, Misiones, and when I'm here in Juarez and I'm spending the weekend, I'll stay here, and I just happened to sit down to do the podcast, and I look up and I go, "Wow, that's gonna be awesome on the show." So hey guys, that's I should take
okay.
that to my actual set. You know, let me buy some of this art. You know,
Okay, yeah, very classy. Okay. So, okay, back to the future. Back to the future.
Back to
Fun
the
fact.
Future.
Fun fact. When the first movie came out, it was the year that I was born.
Wow.
So, yeah. So naturally, this movie, I started watching these movies much later.
Yeah.
When when there were reruns on TV, and
Hmm.
mostly in Spanish, and
In Spanish.
with Latin American dubbing.
Dub. Yeah.
Yeah, so when I rewatched it in English recently. It was a little weird because I was
Yeah.
used to, yeah, because
There's no
I was used,
recorcholis in English. There's no
no,
recorcholis in English.
there is no
There's no
recorcholis.
genial in English, you know?
No,
That's genius.
there is no
No.
emparedado in English either.
Emparedado. No, no. Oh, emparedado. You know, it's like,
Yeah, well, for those of you who don't speak Spanish, there is this thing with Latin American dubbing, and they don't speak the way we actually do, and they use a lot of words that, well, in the hopes of making it more general to the whole Latin American audience. I mean, they try to avoid using words that can only they that are only used in one country. So they try to make it the most general. They try to avoid any kind of accent, so that the whole continent feels included, but it sounds kind of weird in a
That's
funny
actually a
sense.
great. That's a great explanation because I never thought of it that way. I didn't think that they were trying to make it like generic,
Hmm.
so that everybody knows. I always thought that that just cheesy dubbing, because you see the karate movies, they're dubbed too, and they're cheesy too, and when they're dubbed in English, it's like really cheesy dubbing. So I just thought, it's part of the rules. You got to make it cheesy when you dub it.
Well, in fact, that is actually part of it, because well, because of these movies, because these movies usually were aired on open
TV.
networks, open networks. They avoided using strong language, or bad
Mm.
words, or that kind of stuff. So yeah, they tone it down. They tone the language a little bit, and that's when you start getting the recorcholis kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. So like, what can we say instead of? I know what recorcholis.
Recorcholis, yeah. So well, people of my generation, like Patty says here, know this movie by heart, thanks to Canal 5.
Yeah.
There was this thing on Sundays that it was called Cine Permanencia Voluntaria, which is like, well, by the name is sort of like,
You stayed on your own. You're on
yeah,
your own. You're on your own, buddy. You want
you
to watch
stay as
this? It's
long
up
as
to
you
you.
want to, kind of movie. They
Yeah.
and they aired the whole trilogy,
Mm.
and that was part of
Oh,
my
that's awesome.
childhood. Yes, that
Yeah,
was
I
part of
rem-
my childhood.
Yeah, I remember that they would play like they'd start with the one, and then you'd be like, all right, and then they'd go like, stay tuned for part two, and you're like, all right, and then part three, and you're like, man, the whole day has been Back to the Future Day, and then
Yeah.
and then it would happen again. It'd be like, stay tuned for part one. You'd be like,
Yeah,
again,
and then
yeah,
next Sunday you would watch the Karate Kid
good, yeah,
trilogy, and then
yeah,
the next Sunday you would watch Star Wars, and then
yeah.
the next one, these kind of movies were shown over and over and over and over again, and at that time, well, we watched that. I mean,
Yeah.
there's nothing else on TV, so yeah. So it felt a little weird to watch it in English, but yeah, I got I got a lot of jokes that were missed, that were
Oh
lost
yeah.
in translation. So yeah, it's a different experience.
Yeah, I was reading up on stuff. And I can't remember off the top of my head, but
Hmm.
it was they were talking about how they translated. Uh, I can't remember whose name they translated, but it was different in every language. So I was like, oh, that's crazy. It was in French and then in Spanish and then in English, but I can't remember what it was. But it was three different names. I can't remember if it was Marty or what. But I think it was Marty. But I'm not sure.
Yeah. Well, like I was, John's here says, when I was growing up and I'd see a dub film, I just thought they were all cheesy. When you get
Hmm.
to see them in the original language, is a revelation, and it truly is. And one of the jokes that were lost in translation was when this guy, I'm a little bad for names, but the villain of the movie, the bully,
Biff.
what was that?
Biff.
Biff,
His name
yes.
was Biff. Biff
Yes.
Tannen.
Yeah. Whenever he ran into that pile of fertilizing,
Oh yeah.
he says shit,
He's a
and then
shit.
there's
Yeah.
shit coming all over. That is lost
Ah.
because, yeah, it was something like rayos, or I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, I hate manure. He'd always say, I hate
Hmm.
bullshit. It was they would scream shit, and he goes, I hate manure or something like that. Yeah,
Hmm.
and it happened in all three movies. They had to do it in all three movies.
Yeah,
You
they
know
had to do it
that
in
gag.
this. Yes,
Yes.
and like
It's,
kind of like those repeated classic sequences or like
hmm
seal sequences of that trilogy. And well, first of all, which one of the three is your favorite?
I'm gonna have to go with number one. That's my favorite, and I think I think I like all three of them. I think two was a little confusing,
Uh huh.
although I think two is the one that we got the most out of. Like that's the one that had more sci-fi in it that we were able to kind of grow into. That we really all of the futuristic stuff like the Nike Air Max shoes and all that stuff, the flying cars and the holographic stuff, the hoverboard, all that stuff happened in episode two
Yeah.
or part two. But to me, the first one, the classic, was very special for a couple of reasons. Well, actually, one main reason. Um, my mom and dad took us to watch that movie at the movie theater, and it was myself, my little brother, and my sister.
Hmm.
And this is important because that's the only movie I can remember where all four of us went to the movie, all five of us went to the movie together.
Hmm.
My dad didn't speak Spanish, my mom didn't speak English, so it was very
Oh,
rare that we would all go to a movie together. And that movie we all went
okay.
together, and I remember just loving the movie and being happy that we were all there watching that movie. It was in 1985. I was 9 years old, so I was a 9 year
Hmm.
old kid, and I got to go watch this movie. And then also Michael J. Fox at that time was in a TV show called Family Ties, and we all
Hmm.
watched that show on TV. So it was like you get to watch a movie where the guy that you like to watch on TV is also the star of the movie. It was a pretty cool thing for us in 1985. And then we got to see kind of Michael J. Fox was a cool dude in '85. Like he did all the cool dude
Hmm.
stuff. When the opening sequence, when he plays the guitar and the speaker blows him out, and when he's riding the skateboard. I mean, he regenerated the skateboard craze in the United States with that movie. We all went out and bought skateboards. Like we were all like, we
Yeah.
want a skateboard. Like as soon as that movie came out, we had skateboards before, the little plastic ones, that look like a little fish, like a goldfish. And when Back to the Future came out, and he was riding a skateboard and behind the Jeep, and then behind the police car, we were just going crazy for skateboards. And the Volterra, that was the skateboard that he had. We had to have the Volterra skateboard. So we all went out and said, "Hey, let's get." We wanted that skateboard. So that regenerated the whole skateboard craze in the United States. You know, I
Yeah,
remember it.
and I believe that that lingered over in time because
Sure.
by the time we actually reached 2015,
Yeah.
there were people actually trying to replicate the
The ho-
hoverboard.
yeah. Yeah. Yeah, the technology that they always try and replicate the technology from those movies,
Mm-hmm.
and the like the sneakers, the Nike sneakers, the from the movie, you
Uh-huh.
you could buy those in 2015. I think they're
Yeah.
worth like $30,000 right now. It's crazy, but people
Yeah.
people want that. I happened to be in Los Angeles on Back to the Future Day, October 21st,
Oh.
and I didn't realize it was October 21st, and I'm cruising Puente Hills Mall, which is Twin Pines Mall in the movie, and
Mm-hmm.
I had some buddies with me, and we were on a comedy trip, and I go, hey guys, they're from Texas. I go, hey guys, I'm gonna take you by Twin Pines Mall, and so I drove to the back of the parking lot, and we get there, and there's two DeLoreans in the parking lot.
Oh.
And they're like, "Whoa, there's DeLoreans in the parking lot." And
Uh-huh.
then we were like, "This is crazy." And we got off the car and we're looking at the DeLoreans and we start talking to the guys and they go, "It's Back to the Future Day." They
Hmm.
go, this parking lot's going to be full of DeLoreans by the end of the day, and tonight we're having a Back to the Future party, and
Hmm.
it's just going to be packed. So they do that at Puente Hills Mall in the City of Industry in Los Angeles every Back to the Future day, and we just happened to be there that day. It was the greatest thing ever. We were like so excited to see DeLoreans there. It was like it was weird because I was just telling them this is where they shot that scene, and then you see a DeLorean in the parking lot. We're like, what's going on?
It's like a weird spontaneous con,
Yeah, it was
but
weird. But,
not that spontaneous because we had like 35 years of planning.
oh yeah,
But yeah,
it was for us. It was
yeah,
something that caught us completely off guard,
yeah,
but it was awesome.
and it's pretty funny because once you watch that in this age, I mean in this year, you watch the movie number two, and you see all the things that they imagined or they pictured in the future, and that didn't come to exist, or that were particularly funny, or I don't know,
Hmm.
weird. And it's fun to compare it with with reality today. I mean, 2015 was 6 years ago. So
Yeah, we're
it's
beyond it.
we're
Yeah,
beyond, and it's weird, and we still don't have flying cars. We do have drones, but
yeah.
we don't have flying cars. And you also yeah, Patty Franco says something
Well, how
good.
about how about how about Trump being president?
Yeah,
See, Patty just said it. How
yeah,
about
Patty.
Trump being president? Everybody said that's the alternate reality from Back to the Future Two.
Yeah.
Biff Tannen is in control, you know.
Yeah, yeah,
And
that was our own personal thing
yeah, it's I mean,
with a
what is
different
it?
name but the same tacky taste.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's I really liked part two. uh Crispin Glover, I guess he had gotten into a dispute with the people at Back to the Future, so they wrote him out. That's why he was dead in the second one. You know,
Oh.
Marty McFly,
Mm-hmm.
his dad, he got written out of the second movie, and so that was kind of sad. It was sad to see that. I mean, it was George McFly. It was sad to see that George McFly was gone.
Mm-hmm.
um, it was kind of a sad thing because we all grew up laughing like him.
Yeah.
That's how he laughed in the movie. We were like, McFly, McFly, anybody there? We used to do that all the time. Anybody
Yeah.
there, McFly? It was cool. It was awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy. I mean, probably movie number two is the most iconic because it's where you get the most out of the universe. I mean, you have the past, you have the future, you have the present. That present is now the past, but
Yeah.
yeah, and
And
most of the most.
the yeah,
Sorry.
the third one. A lot of people didn't like the third one.
Yeah.
And I liked the third one. I thought it was not as good as the first one, obviously,
Hmm.
but I still think it's a good movie. You
Hmm.
know, it 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 had some holes in the plot. Like Seamus was his great grandfather, but
Hmm.
then he was still married to his great grandmother that looked exactly like his mom, which is
Yeah.
weird because they're not from the same families at all.
Hmm.
But I really really did like the third one, and it was a fun western movie. I see that John Webster film is saying I'm a sucker for westerns. So even though I think the original is probably the best, it's still my favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I did like the third one a lot. I really liked that at the end of the third one they show up in a hover train. I think that was such a cool ending. That that Doc's gonna time travel. It doesn't matter. He's gonna do it. Perfect circumstance. He's got those goofy looking kids. I think that's great. you
Yeah,
know.
it's adorable. And
Yeah.
Tanya for the money for las chelas for
All
beers.
right. Is that
Thank you
Tanya
so much.
from
And if
Producciones Sin
you
Contexto?
yeah.
Is that Tanya? Hey, Tanya, thanks for the beers.
And if you want to contribute, you are welcome to contribute, and you can do that through the super chat and the super stickers, and it will be very. I will be very thankful for that. So thanks,
Cool.
Tanya. And yeah, I mean, I like the third movie. I do like the third movie. I know that it's not the best one, but to be honest, the whole trilogy is not the best time travel story that there is. There are
Hmm.
some flaws, uh, but it's really close to my heart because of all the memories that I have while watching it and when I
Okay,
was.
this interview is over. Okay, this interview. No, just
No, I mean, of course
which
you
is the
have.
best? Which one do you think is the best time travel?
I would say that it's Dark, the series from Netflix,
I have not
because
watched it.
you should you should. It is a little bit complex to understand, even for the most experienced time travel
Fanatic.
fan. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that Dark really nails is how they connect time as a perfect circle.
Hmm.
Everything that you do in the past affects the future, but also everything that you do in the future can affect the past, because time is not like in Doctor Who. Time is not a straight line. It is a timey wimey timey wimey stuff. But John is also angry about my comment. uh,
Yeah, I was like, this is it. We're
I
done.
am sorry. I am sorry to break it to you guys. I know it is like Leo says, my husband, he says that is not the best, but it's the first to be ingrained in people's mind, and it's true. And not also in your mind. I mean, I am very fond of. I mean, I don't personally consider it the best time traveling story that there is, but it is my favorite. You
Okay,
know,
that's a good fix. That's a good fix. I'm
it
gonna tell
is.
you some of the things that I appreciated about Back to the Future that a lot of time travel movies up until then didn't address. For example, before Back to the Future, if you were in New York and you time traveled, you would end up in Paris somehow,
Oh yeah, you
right?
could.
And you were going like, how did you end up in you traveled in
Yeah.
time and in space? I don't get it. Well, Back to the Future addressed that. They remember Doc says you're not thinking in the fourth dimension,
Mm-hmm.
right? And he
Yes.
goes, I'm gonna hit those. And the third one, he goes, I'm gonna hit those Indians right there. And he goes, you're not thinking in the fourth dimension. You
Yeah.
know, you're not. That wall won't be there when you go back in time. And he
Yeah.
goes back in time, and it's real Indians coming at him. So it was like
Yeah.
that was such a cool thing about this movie that
Hmm.
it kind of established some of the rules for time travel. Like you can't just because you traveled in time doesn't mean you traveled to a different location. I really
Yeah.
appreciated that about this movie. When he's at the mall and he hits 88 miles an hour and he crashes into the barn because
Hmm.
the barn would have been there in 1955. That to me was like whoa. It opened my mind to thinking that's true. And if you like history, if you like stuff, how many times have you walked in a mall parking lot and thought what used to be here before this mall was here?
Hmm.
Uh, or if they tell you, hey, this is where such and such used to be, you go, I can't believe it. It's a parking lot. King Richard III, I believe, they found his bones in a parking lot, under a parking lot in England. You
Hmm.
know, they dug him up, and he was right in the middle of a parking lot. So, how many
Hmm.
people parked in that space in that parking lot, not realizing that they were
And
parking like right over
yeah,
King
they
Richard?
were
You
parking
know,
it over the bones of someone that it was pointed out by God.
yeah, a super historical figure. You know, so
Yeah.
I think you have to love history to really appreciate the time travel movies.
Yeah.
And I think that was something that they did that hadn't been done. They're
Yeah.
talking, they're not just magically um, going back in time, and so I appreciated that. There's a lot of stuff about the movies that I like. I really liked the how much everything changed in 30 years. You know, even our vocabulary. For whatever reason, in 1955, we had a totally different vocabulary.
Mm-hmm.
When we had different products, like when he's sitting at the diner and he asks for a tab, and
Mm-hmm.
the guy at the diner goes, "Hey, I can't open a tab unless you get something," and he meant like a diet soda. You know, so it's pretty crazy. You know, in the second movie when he goes into the '80s cafe, you know, and he's shooting he's shooting with the video games, he's shooting with the gun, and he goes, "Yeah, quick draw. I was a good," and then the kids are like,
Oh,
"I
you
was
have to use your
champion." You have to
hands.
use your hands. That's for kids, right? And so it's like it's such a wow. I never thought about this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
That it was so lighthearted that you could appreciate it. You know, it wasn't so complex like you said about Dark. You really have to pay attention. Well, here you didn't have to. You could just have fun
Yeah,
with the
yeah,
movie.
and that's why that's why this is, well, it might not be the best, but it's my favorite because it's more, well, I have more fun memories watching this
Back to the
trilogy
Future. Yeah.
than watching Dark the series.
Yeah.
And of course also the character attachment that you develop,
Yes.
it's not the same. I mean, for starters, one of the things that it may be an issue when you're watching Dark is the language barrier. I mean, they of when with English it's easy to with for me to relate to a character because I understand what they're saying. I understand how they move in and all that kind of stuff. And also in Spanish. But when you have to pay so much attention to the subtitles,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm used to watch subtitles. I used to watch a lot of anime when I was in college,
Hmm.
and and I watched it in Japanese. I did have to pay a lot of attention to the subtitles and also to the image that I was watching and the characters, but maybe uh I don't know, the some of the culture environment, I don't know,
Uh
it's
huh.
a little easy, it's a little, I mean, it's a little hard to relate. So that really failed in that aspect. They didn't make all of the characters that easily relatable and lovable.
Yeah.
While on the other hand, you have Marty McFly, you have Dr. Emmett Brown, which are who are lovely in
Yeah.
on all the sense of the way. I mean, that thing where every time someone called a chicken to Marty, he immediately and
And I think that the whole chicken thing, I may be wrong, maybe some of you guys know. I don't think it was even an issue till the second movie.
hmm
I don't think it even came up in the first movie. I
it
think
did.
I think in the second movie they came up with the whole idea that he didn't like to be called chicken. But I don't think it happened in the first movie at all. And then in the third movie they did it again. I
Hmm.
love some of the comedic relief in those is good. You know, like when he says, "What's your name?" and he's trying to think of the best cowboy name he can come up with. And he goes, Clint Eastwood, and then in the back, what kind of sissy name is that? You know, that's just such a classic
Yeah,
because he's
yeah,
thinking big tough cowboy Clint Eastwood, and they're going like, what kind of sissy? That is great, like little comedic line, hidden treasures in those movies. You know, stuff like when they squeeze his mouth and go, look at them pearly whites, white teeth, brown water. Remember the
oh
brown
yeah,
water? And so that stuff we never thought of as kids. You know, they
yeah,
tell you go back in time, you're not thinking like there was brown water, there was no ice, and Doc Brown made that whole contraption just to make a cube of ice. That was awesome. I mean, that's all, you know. And then it messes with your mind because he goes back in the past and he buries the DeLorean, and then he sends a letter to Marty for 1955,
hmm
and he gets the letter with instructions on where he left the DeLorean. I mean, there's a lot of thinking in that. I
yeah,
really enjoyed that. I remember when I was younger. It's been a while, but I went back and checked dates, and I was like comparing time frames and saying, well, if you went back, so how many years would it have been? And it all kind of checked out, you know. But there's some holes. There's some holes in the plot, and it's okay though. It's such
Yeah,
a fun movie, you know.
it is fun.
And
And thanks, Fofo, for those
hey,
50.
Popo, what's up, buddy?
Thanks.
Yeah,
And yeah, I mean, sometimes those flaws you are well, there are flaws and there are flaws, okay? And some flaws you uh, are not so forgettable, are not so forgivable. But
forgivable,
in
yeah,
these flaws are not that much of
big,
an issue. I mean, they don't cut the fun, they don't
yeah,
they don't break the suspension of disbelief. I mean, they I mean, they are not fatal for the story.
mm.
I
Yeah. The
mean,
story keeps going,
yeah, the
and
story
you
keeps
don't
going.
you don't feel completely stupid for going along with it. Like
Yeah.
you can just go, all right, I can deal with that.
Mm,
That's a minor flaw. There's a lot of cool like facts about it, like unknown facts, like it's pretty known stuff for Back to the Future fans. But for example, you know that this Marty's auditioning for the Battle of the Bands, and he's playing the song in the gym, and the guy comes out with a megaphone and goes, "You're just too darn loud, sir. We can't do this." Do you know who that is?
no, I don't think I do.
Okay, so the theme song to Back to the Future, or one of the main songs, is "The Power of Love" by
Mhm,
Huey Lewis and the News. That was a
mhm.
band in '85. Huey Lewis was the school teacher that had the glasses, and he
Oh.
goes, "You're too loud." So there was a cameo there by Huey Lewis, and he was the guy who actually sings the real song, telling Marty McFly that he's too loud. So that was pretty cool to see that dude do that role, you know. And so it's all stuff that you kind of catch, you know.
Mhm,
Little things like 1.21 gigawatts. You know,
mhm,
1.21 gigawatts wasn't gigawatts aren't an electrical thing. It's gigawatts. You know,
mhm,
but Doc Brown made the mistake of saying gigawatts because when the producers were investigating the screenplay, they misunderstood and they thought it was gigawatts. So he said it wrong. Gigawatts. It's
mhm.
gigawatts. 1.21 gigawatts. You know, so little things like that that you pick up on the movie that are pretty awesome. You know, uh, I mean, it's great. Loved them.
Yeah,
Could
and well, Marty McFly. Well, we all know that is Michael J. Fox, the legend that give life to Marty McFly, but he actually was not the guy who was going to play Marty McFly.
correct.
The original actor for Marty was Eric Stoltz, and he actually did a great. He actually shot for I don't know 6 weeks or so, but the producers found out that the comedy around, I mean, the chemistry between him and the doctor was not good enough, so they
Hmm.
decided to recast him. And because they did ask Michael J. Fox first to be Marty because he was one of the cool guys from the 80s. I mean, for this role, even I mean, every cool 80s actor was auditioning for this role. But at that time, I mean, Michael J. Fox had a conflict of schedule, and for that reason, he rejected the role in the first place. So they went for Eric Stoltz, but they found out that there was no chemistry out there. The comedy wasn't working at all. So they recast the role, and it finally went to their original choice.
Yeah, you
uh,
know, Johnny Depp auditioned for that.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
a lot of the '80s actors
Hmm.
auditioned for that. Christopher Lloyd wasn't convinced. Jeff Goldblum auditioned for Doc Brown.
Yeah,
You know, Jeff Goldblum. So there was a lot of actors that were
Michael also
yeah
Robert
that
Duvall.
were yeah, Ralph Macchio, the
Macho,
Karate
yeah.
Kid, auditioned for Marty McFly's character. I can't imagine, but Michael J. Fox was just the guy at that time. I mean, because of his sitcom, so it's kind of cool that he got that role. Um, Fun fact about Eric Stoltz: it cost $3 million to re-record
Hmm.
his scenes with Michael J. Fox. 3 million.
Yeah, I
That's
like.
how much they lost. And
Yeah.
they also had they said that they didn't like Eric Stoltz's. He was a method actor. So he wanted people to call him Marty all the time. And so there's a urban legend that Steven Spielberg was like, Eric, let me speak to you. He goes, no, it's Marty. And he goes, not anymore. You're fired. But that's not true. That's like an urban myth, but he got fired. Like
I would be surprised about it, but yeah.
he
And
goes, it's Marty. No, not anymore. You're fired. you know.
Peter, he says that Eric Stoltz is in the film for a tiny bit. That it's the fist that punches Biffs in that they kept that frame.
Yeah, they didn't re-record that scene, and
Uh-huh.
also they when he's wearing the yellow suit and he gets into the DeLorean, when he's
Hmm.
wearing the radiation suit, they
Okay,
just
yeah.
kept that scene too because you couldn't tell it wasn't Eric Stoltz. They didn't reshoot that. It was Eric Stoltz
Oh, yeah.
getting
The
into
Darth
the
Vader
DeLorean,
scene.
the Darth Vader scene.
The Darth Vader from Volcran
Actually,
scene.
actually, the band Van Halen would not give them permission to use the Van Halen uh, music. So Eddie Van Halen recorded that piece specifically for the movie, and they were allowed to put Eddie. If you notice, it says Eddie Van Halen on the cassette tape
Mhm.
because that was written specifically for the movie.
Okay, John here says, I love the scene in French that shows a movie theater in the alternate a reality show in Back to the Future with Eric Stoltz. Yeah,
Yeah, I haven't seen that.
there are a lot of these tiny little details and
Hmm.
in throughout the well, this is in French and in this is another I believe this is another time travel movie. I didn't watch it, but I know which show is it. But yeah, I mean
But
there
that was just like Biff's alternate reality. I mean, it was so close to being Eric Stoltz, but no, Michael J. Fox.
yeah. And I can't to be honest, I can't imagine Back to the Future without uh Michael J. Fox.
Mm-mm.
I just can't. And
Not,
I mean a lot of the jokes were around well, a lot of Biff's jokes and of Biff lines were around his height.
yeah,
And that kind of stuff that make me comedy doesn't dare to do anymore. Uh but yeah, and so many of the staple things about this movie wouldn't have been the same at all if they had picked another actor. So yeah, I'm really
yeah,
glad that they picked Michael J. Fox for this. And thanks, Carla. Fringe was a paranormal series. I started watching like a couple episodes, but I didn't. It didn't connect with me. I mean, I didn't connect with the series, so I stopped watching it. But yeah. And okay, I'm reading some of the comments and
that's
I'm
fine.
trying to catch up with them because that's a lot of stuff going on out there. But
Peace,
oh yeah,
everybody.
yeah. I think there were talks about something. I believe that a remake with
Oh
Tom
yeah,
Holland.
they were talking about
But
that, and they said they're not going to do it. But
Mhm.
they did do like an animated series They did a
Hmm.
video game. They did a lot of different things where they would they would go ahead and revamp it, but they wouldn't redo the movies, which I think is great. 'Cause-
Yeah, but they did a deep fake video of a scene where Marty and Doc are walking in the halls of the school,
Mhm.
and they put the Tom Holland's face on Michael, and I believe it was Robert Downey Jr. as the Doc,
Mhm.
and it I mean, it looked so authentic that everybody thought that it was going to be a thing, but well, it was a deep fake. But it would have been cool to reimagine this series. Maybe not as a remake, but probably as a continuation of the story. I don't know, because I mean, there's a lot more to talk about, and maybe they could actually do some meta jokes about the things that didn't actually happen in 2015 or something. I don't know, but it could
You
be
know
cool.
that school where they shot where you're talking about where those scenes were, that school's in Whittier, California. It's Whittier High School, and that's where they shot the movie at.
Hmm.
And that's actually an interesting fact about that. You guys have to remember my podcast is about interesting facts. So I know I got a lot of little things, but that high school is actually where Richard Nixon attended.
Oh.
Richard Nixon was president of the United States, and uh, at one point in time, and so that was the high school that he attended in Whittier. And speaking of presidents, President Reagan
Hmm.
loved the movie.
Yeah.
So he's mentioned in the movie because when Marty goes to see Doc Brown in the mansion for the first time, he says, "Who's the president of the United States in 1985?" He
Yeah,
says, "Ronald Reagan." He says, "The
it's a
actor?"
joke.
Right? And
Yeah.
so Ronald Reagan loved that movie so much, he actually quoted it in one of his speeches.
Hmm.
And he was talking about the Star Wars program. And he says, and like the movie Back to the Future says, where we're going, there are no roads.
Hmm.
So, yeah, that was, presidential fun facts about Back to the Future. I thought were pretty cool. You know?
Yeah. And um, talking about the politics of the movie, where you see this the character in 55 that is a waiter, and then in 85 he is actually the
The mayor.
major of
Yeah.
town.
Yeah.
Those little those tiny connections between side characters in the past and
In
what
the
they do
future.
in the future is pretty fun to watch. Is one of the things that give the movie the flavor that it has. Those tiny little details that
Okay.
every time you watch it, you notice something different.
Yeah, he says, I'm going to clean up this town. He goes, good. Start by sweeping the floor,
Yeah.
remember? And well, another fun fact: the guy running the actor that is portrayed as in 1955. There's a campaign going on, and there's a poster of a white guy on the side of one of the older vans, and he's running for mayor.
Hmm.
That actor is the same guy that wakes up in the park bench in 1985 when he
Hmm.
crashes the DeLorean into the movie theater.
Hmm.
You remember that scene at the very end of the first one where he crashes into the movie theater and he's running back. The Libyans are coming around the corner, and there's a guy sleeping on a park bench, a homeless guy.
Hmm.
That's the same actor as the guy in the photo in the 1955 political campaign.
Oh, I didn't notice that. I didn't notice that, but yeah. And
That's a weird fact. That's yeah, it's one of those weird facts about the movie.
a lot of the actors were the same, but
Yeah.
they were just representing, the ancestors or something like
Hmm.
that.
Well, Michael
Uh,
J. Fox obviously played his great grandfather,
mhm.
and he played his daughter in part two.
Yeah.
He was his own daughter.
Uh-huh.
It was it's pretty crazy. Um, uh, Jennifer was different from
Oh,
part one to part two
oh
and
yeah,
part
yeah.
three.
They picked another 80s girl and
Yeah,
for
it
part
was
two,
yeah,
the legendary Elizabeth Shue from Karate
Elizabeth
Kid.
Shue. Hmm.
Uh, yeah, she was Jennifer in part two and part three. I don't know why they recast the actress that played Jennifer, but I believe that is because of in part two she had more uh lines or no, I don't know. And now
No, the actress that played Jennifer in part one, her mom was sick, and
oh
so like I think her mom had cancer or something, and she had to tend to her mom. She wasn't available to shoot part two,
mm,
so they went ahead and went with Elizabeth Shue,
mhm,
and then she was able to. She just kept they just kept her, but um, um, she wasn't she wasn't able to do part two because of
mhm.
she was taking care of her mom or something, which
Oh,
which sucked because I like the first Jennifer better.
oh yeah,
Yeah.
well they're both pretty and well good actresses, but it would have been fun. You know what? It would have been fun. It would have been fun if Marty McFly was played by Ralph Macchio, and then they picked Elizabeth Shue to play Jennifer. It would have been hilarious.
And Biff could have been Johnny. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just it's like Johnny could have been Biff. It would have been
yeah,
it
and
could have been
there's
about
actually
karate instead of time travel. That would have been awesome.
yeah, we made a whole other movie here,
Yeah. Let's
whole
let's
other
make let
saga.
yeah, I got an idea. Let's make Ralph Macchio the lead, Elizabeth Shue the middle, and the bully will be a guy named Biff, but he'll be played by Johnny from the Karate Kid. you know?
Yeah, by William Sapka. Okay. That will be there's actually a guy that looks a lot like William Sapka in movie number 3,
Hmm.
and during the final scenes where they with the race,
Hmm.
the race, one of the guys that was on the other car or the other truck, I don't remember which kind of uh
Yeah.
car was it, but one of them looked very much like William Sapka.
Mm.
So it was fun. So it
Yeah.
was fun to imagine that scenario.
Very,
Yeah.
very, yeah, it was very, very cool. Um, yeah, like I said, I don't think that the first movie really addressed the chicken thing. I think
Mm.
that was the second movie and then the third movie. I
Hmm.
think they set that in motion in the second movie about him being a chicken. But I don't know. I didn't watch the trilogy like
I do
recent. I
remember.
haven't.
I do remember in the first movie a moment like that, but it was not as evident or as as characteristic of Marty until the second movie. They didn't give that much attention to it. But yeah, I believe the second movie was the one where they established that fact about that character that lingered
Yeah,
on to
that he
until
that he couldn't be told called chicken. Yeah, I don't remember. I don't remember it all in the first one.
yeah.
I mean, I
Well,
remember.
John here says that it was in the second
Yeah, it was
movie. So yeah.
introduced. Yeah, it was.
Mm,
I mean, they show the scene where he's driving the Toyota with Jennifer, but they don't show the race
mhm,
scene or what happens or anything like that till the second one. So yeah,
mhm,
I agree with John on that one.
yeah. Uh, So, oh my god, I forgot what I was going to say. Oh, okay. I was going to talk about the third movie.
Okay.
The first movie is pretty much the one that establishes the whole universe that we are
Hmm.
watching, right? And is one of the fan favorites, and it's one of the most classic ones. Is the one? It's probably one of the three that people most remember, but the second movie gave us more of the most iconic elements of the trilogy. But the third movie, which is pretty much the underdog of these movies, uh, does have some pretty charming uh, elements also. And one of them is the irony of Clint Eastwood, the
Yeah.
irony of Clint Eastwood character or image that we as an audience have, because we relate him to the good,
Hmm.
the bad, and the ugly, and all those Western films, and we see Marty introducing himself
Clint Eastwood.
as Clint Eastwood, and that joke that you mentioned, that which kind of
What
which
kind
kind
of
of
sissy name
what
is
kind of
that?
sissy what kind of sissy name is that? And also, one of the most adorable things was Marty's wardrobe when he got to 1885.
Yeah, he's wearing the 1955 TV version of cowboy clothes, and it's
Uh-huh.
and they point out he's wearing Reeboks. They're like, oh, he's wearing Nikes. They're like, what kind of moccasins are those? Nikkei. you know. So it was all
Yeah.
kinds of little jokes in there that were pretty awesome. They mentioned his teeth. They mentioned how and those things you don't think about. They mentioned the moccasins. They thought he was in the circus. In the first film, they thought he was in the Navy, so that was kind of a recurring joke in the third one. Now they were saying he was in the circus because of the way he was dressed. So I mean, it was awesome. I I I think it was such a well done, clever movie, even though it's not as good as the first. Like I said, it's still a fun movie to watch. Claris Ravine, it became Clint Eastwood Ravine because that's where the train went over the track. So now it wasn't the Claris Ravine anymore. It was renamed after that guy that fell in there with a train. So it was pretty awesome. Little details they put in the movie. Of course, it's a Robert Zemeckis film, and yeah, Steven Spielberg is a producer, so
Mhm.
obviously they did a good job with it. There's a lot of Easter eggs in there from other movies that we're
Mhm.
not fully aware of, but it was great. Alan Silvestri did the film score. I love that dude's um, film scores. I mean, they're just
Mhm.
awesome the way the music makes these movies. You can Google like movies without the music, and they're awkward when you watch them. But the music just makes the movie really great. He did Forrest Gump. Alan Silvestri did
Mhm.
Forrest Gump too. The film, the sound. It's
Yeah, yeah,
awesome.
and it was actually the same director, right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Robert Zemeckis. Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It is usual. It is frequent that some directors like to work with certain people, and well, this is one of those cases. And and yeah, Back to the Future, as much as Star Wars or Superman or I don't know, uh, any John Williams scored film, they have very iconic themes.
hmm
And even though Back to the Future was not scored
John
by
Williams.
John
Yeah,
Williams, it does have this iconic theme.
feel. Yeah,
You immediately you think of the DeLorean and you immediately think of that song, of that
yeah.
theme.
A matter
Uh-huh.
of fact, the DeLorean actually sent a letter to the producers thanking them for using the car, saying, "Hey, thanks for saying we're the car of the future."
Oh
you know?
yeah, and then there's a
Yeah,
fun fact with him.
yeah, there's a
He got
yeah,
in jail. He got in jail because of I don't know, some drug dealing or something like that. I don't know,
yeah,
but yeah, he was in jail when the movie came out, and
came out.
he yeah. So he was very thankful to the producers and the director for making his legacy be seen with positive eyes. So yeah.
Yeah, I think they only made like 10,000 of those DeLoreans,
Mm.
like ever, and so to get one right now is pretty hard, but they're out there. You can get one. If I had all the money in the world, I probably would buy one and just fix it up and make it the Back to the Future DeLorean. They had like five different ones, but I would. I would do that for sure. You know, if I had money to just throw away, that's what I would throw it away on. You know.
Yeah, well, that's probably one of the most fan favorite uh, time
Hmm.
traveling machines. I mean, there's
Of
of
course.
course the TARDIS. There is of course the TARDIS, and like you mentioned before, uh, the TARDIS does have the does have the capacity of traveling through time and space at the same time.
Mm,
But the DeLorean, I don't know. There's something about the DeLorean.
yeah.
There is
It,
something
it, it-
about it.
Ford offered them like $50,000 to use a Ford Mustang,
Mhm.
and they're like, nah, Doc Brown would not use a Ford Mustang, and
No,
so they rejected the money and went with the DeLorean. I think that was a good move.
yeah. So, Sam, if you had the money to afford a DeLorean, would you have the money to afford the flux capacitor?
I would love to have a flux capacitor. That's what makes time travel possible. Everybody that's a Back to the Future fan knows that. That's the
Mhm.
most important part of the DeLorean, the flux capacitor. I have a funny story. I said it on my podcast, but um, when I was freshly divorced, my buddy and I were going out all the time, and we were like going to Hooters and different places to have wings. And we were talking to all these girls, and we're like, I think these girls are too young for us. So we decided that we would use a question to know whether the girl was old enough for us or not. And the question was, do you know what a flux capacitor is? If the girl said yes, I know what a flux capacitor is. We're like, hey, so what's up? How you doing? Let's get some drinks. But if she was like, no, I don't know what that is, we're like, she's too young for us. We got to move on. So that was the question right there. Uh, we know what a flux capacitor is. And my
It is
buddy,
a good filter.
yeah, and my buddy was talking about it in the car with me one time. He goes, "Dude, I was talking to my girls because I have two girls, and they were little back then. My girls were sitting in the back seat, and my buddy goes, "Dude, I was talking to this girl, and I was like, hey man, do you know what a flux capacitor is?" And then my daughter answers right away. Of course, it's what makes time travel possible. And then my friend just looks at me and he goes, "How come she knows?" I go, "Dude, we're Back to the Future fans. She
Yeah.
knows." He goes, "Dude, we would be in trouble with with a young girl that was a fan."
In that case, you would have to ask some more
I,
questions.
yeah, I go, that's an exception right there. It's like,
Yeah, yeah.
but hey, she might be young, but at least you have something in common. you know. But that was the whole thing. Is like when they're too young, you have nothing in common with them. What are we going to talk about? They don't know what cassette tapes were like. They don't know what it was like to have a Walkman with a
Yeah.
cassette. you know, um,
Then of course there are cases like mine. My siblings are much older than me, and my sister
mhm.
is 9 years older than me, and my brother is 8 years older than me. So these movies, I watch them with them,
Yeah,
especially with
that
my brother.
that's not. Yeah, they're my generation. We're the same age.
Yeah, yes,
Yeah, because I'm not. I was 9 when this movie came out.
hmm and I was being born when the movie
You were
came
being
out.
born. Yeah.
Yeah, I was being born, and so yes, these movies, Back to the Future, Karate Kid, are tied in my memory to my time with my brother before he got married.
Hmm.
So I this is, but that's probably one of the reasons why I'm very fond of them.
Yes.
But yeah, so there's cases like that. So when young siblings watch this kind of stuff with their older siblings, and therefore they
Yeah,
know.
and I think it's like that with my daughters. I think
Mhm,
that they watched it with me. I introduced them to the series. We watched it together. They were little, and they really they have a soft spot in their heart because Dad loves Back to the Future, and
mhm,
they love Back to the Future because of Dad. So it became this thing where we have that connection.
mhm,
And I think it's like that with Star Wars or any of the other movies. You grow up watching with your siblings or your parents, and it's got a soft spot because your parents liked it. I mean, I'm not old
mhm.
enough to be your dad, but the thing is that there is generations now that I would be old enough to be their dad that are are being introduced to Star Wars and they're being introduced to Back to the Future. And so I think it just
Hmm.
depends. If your dad likes heavy metal, you like heavy metal. You know, if your mom and dad grew up listening to that and they introduce you to that, or gangster rap or whatever you want to call it. I mean, that stuff to us seems like it was just yesterday, but it was 30 years ago. I mean, we were listening, you know, that movie Straight Outta Compton. I knew the movie from what I remembered. I was like, oh yeah, this is gonna happen and that's gonna happen, and it happened because I remembered because I lived it. You know, so it's one of those things that our generation lived those movies, but there's a lot of movies that our parents liked that we grew up watching. Like how many Pedro Infante movies did we grow up watching? You know, or and there's a special or Cantinflas, you know, and there's a special spot in our heart for those movies because it reminds us of our parents. So yeah, I think that that's what's beautiful about this genre is that
Yeah,
movies is that you can appreciate them 36 years later. You know.
yeah, and well, for example, with Back to the Future, we haven't gotten a rerun. I mean, um, a new, I mean, a new version of it or a continuation of it, like we have with Star Wars or with many of other franchises. For example, I mean, Ghostbusters and those kind of movies.
Yeah.
I well, there's a reason that people is get going back to those stories with a new version, and it's all because of nostalgia. There was something about that time, the 80s and 90s, that made movies so special. Movies.
Well, you know, back in the '80s, there's a fun fact about Back to the Future was that all of the studios passed on it.
Hmm.
They didn't want to do the movie because at that time, Porky's was real popular. A lot of those type of movies that were very grungy, very dirty, very sexual movies were popular. The Police Academy movies, all those movies were real popular. So Back to the Future was a little bit,
Like going back.
yeah, it was like you say, it wasn't blue enough. You know, it wasn't raunchy enough. But Zemeckis and Spielberg, they they teamed up on this, and so they were kind of able to get them to take a look at it, and eventually Universal picked it up, and then Universal had the cars on display at the amusement park forever. I have a
Mm.
bunch of pictures because I would go take a pictures of when I first started traveling to as a tourist to LA. I would go take pictures. They had the ride Back to the Future ride, which then became
Hmm.
the Simpsons ride.
Yeah,
I remember that happening.
I
So
I went there.
yeah, so
Uh-huh.
but it was one of those things that you this movie almost didn't happen
Uh-huh.
because because it wasn't dirty enough. You know, it wasn't Animal House, it wasn't Porky's, it wasn't that style of movie. But the, I think that that's the success of it. You know, we could watch that movie with our families, and
Yeah.
that was what was great about it.
Not long ago, I watched the whole three movies with my son, with my 6-year-old son,
Hmm.
and he loved it.
Yeah,
He loved the whole story. And for a kid of 6-year-old kid in this age with YouTube, where he can watch wherever he wants, and he can switch to another video whenever he wants, and he can do he can basically consume any kind of content he wants
yeah,
when he wants it. To like this kind of movie, it was some it tells you about this how special these movies are, how good these stories are. And well, one of the things that I was mentioning was nostalgia, and I believe that it has to do with the fact that you had more emotional connection before, when you had to actually go to a well, you of course you have the movie theaters today, and you still have that, but and you can still make memories out of that. But um well, of course, COVID has closed some movie theaters, and that, but uh, aside from COVID, you still have that. But there was something about 80s and 90s, and well, back when you had to actually buy something in order to consume it. For example, with music, you had to go to the record store, you had to pick your record, and you had to go to your house, put it on your player, and you had to sit down, appreciate the music, and actually you had something to look at because the artwork. And the same thing with movies. When you have to go to rent a movie, and you don't have that anymore because
Yeah.
everything is digital, everything is
Well,
downloadable, streamable.
what we say is that there's instant gratification,
Yes.
and we didn't have instant gratification. Matter of fact, back in the 80s, if you weren't home, nobody could get a hold of you.
Mhm.
That's it. Like if you wanted to go play with Johnny and you wanted to make arrangements, you would just make arrangements the day before, and you go, all right, at 2 o'clock, we're gonna meet at the park. Bring your bike. All right, see you there. Because if Johnny didn't show up at 2 o'clock, you weren't gonna find Johnny. He didn't have a cell phone.
Mhm.
We didn't even have beepers. Beepers were like 90s. So in
Mhm.
the 80s, it was like you made arrangements with your friends and you kept your arrangements, and that was it. You were home or you weren't home. And there was a certain amount of freedom to that we don't have right now.
Mhm.
There's a certain amount of liberty, and it was also really hard to do business. Because you couldn't find anybody. You had to like you had to know where they were at all times to be able to get a hold of them. My dad was a contractor, and there was one bar he liked to hang out at after work, and people would call him at the bar to get a hold of him. And they'd go, "Hey, you got a call," and he'd be like, "Hey, what's up?" "Okay, yeah, I'll go tomorrow. I'll check." And he'd get jobs at the bar. They'd call him at the bar because he had nowhere to go. I mean, they knew he would be there.
Uh-huh.
So it was a different time. Definitely going to the record store, going to the shoot. We don't have to go that far. We used to rent videos. We used to go to the video store and rent videos. That was a Friday night.
Mhm.
Like, what are you going to do on Friday night? I don't know. Let's go rent a movie. You'd make a 2 hour event of renting a movie. You'd get the kids, you'd put them in the car, or you as kids would get in the car. You'd go down to the video store, you'd browse the halls of the video store looking for what movies you wanted to watch. You'd get a
Yeah.
pile of movies, and you'd buy some of the popcorn or candy there, and you'd go rent the movies. And then you had movies for the whole weekend. That was an event. That's
Mhm.
gone. Kids are on YouTube. The attention spans are short. People can't. That's why my podcast is only 20 minutes, because the attention spans are short. I realize that people
Mhm.
aren't gonna. I mean, it's cool, but a lot of people can't watch an hour long podcast.
Yeah.
They just can't. It's not even that they have a job or anything. It's that they're thinking about something else. They're checking their email. I mean, their social media status, because they can't be offline for more than an hour.
Mhm.
So we live in a different time. I don't know that it's better. I think that a lot of the problems that we have today is because we're all connected so much. I feel like we're all living in the same house and we can't stand each other.
Mm.
Like
Well, that
you know
happened
what
before. That happened before, but you had more freedom to go out, and no one would bother you because they wouldn't have anywhere to call you unless you
Nobody
gave them.
knew what you had for breakfast.
Mhm.
There was no pictures of your breakfast anywhere. Nobody knew that you had that you got a frappuccino on your way to get your nails. I mean, there was like that's a modern thing. Like you had a lot more privacy, and you had to like get together to talk about your day. You had to get together and talk about what you did with your friends. So
Mhm.
that's all changed. Like it's so instant. Everybody knows what everybody's doing all the time, and I think that's why we have such a hard time with everything. Why we get so offended about everything. That's why
Mhm.
every little thing bothers us. It's like you living with that roommate that never picks up his shoes always leaves them in the same spot. And every day you walk in, you go, I can't believe you left your shoes there. I already told you 3 times, don't leave your shoes there. Now it's offensive to me because now you're doing it on purpose. So I think
Mhm.
the whole world's like that right now because
Mhm.
we're so connected. You know,
Yeah.
it's a negative.
And about movie and well generally any storytelling um thing that I've noticed is that the 80s is a very popular time frame where they can develop stories. And I believe it's because of what you said, that
Yeah,
people had more freedom to do stuff. For example, well, we see those Steven Spielberg movies with kids that they were free to go around and on their bikes and no one would ever bother them, and
yeah.
their and their parents would never be worried about where they were because they were, I mean, these were other times. And I believe that that gives a writer the freedom to tell more stuff than if you
Yeah.
have a story where parents are constantly worried about the whereabouts of their kids, and the the modern way that we parent
Hmm.
is completely I mean, today these days I wouldn't be as I wouldn't be comfortable letting my kids go out the way they were in the 80s, for example.
Hmm.
And I believe that's one of the things that make this decade and the 90s more like a wonderful time to do some storytelling. So
Yeah, I think there's a combination of a couple of things that happened. The first thing that happened was video games became very popular,
mhm,
late 70s, early 80s. By the time the 90s rolled around, there was actual gamers. I
mhm,
mean, the PS, the Sony PlayStation came out. That was a total game changer, and that also took away from a lot of kids playing outside.
mhm,
We used to go outside and play. That was the thing, is you'd play a video game for a couple hours maybe at night, but it wasn't a whole day. It wasn't an all day thing. It was like you were going to go outside and kick the ball. You were going to go play with your friends. You were going to, and even here in Mexico, I mean, I would go to my cousin's house in Chihuahua, and we would play bote volado till 2 in the morning. I mean,
mhm,
we were out there running around. But this whole thing with tablets, little kids with tablets, I see babies with cell phones and tablets. The mom will give them the phone so the baby will stop crying, and the baby, no, there's a different intelligence to get on YouTube and all these streaming platforms. It takes a different kind of intelligence, but you see that these kids are doing this, and they're doing it at a very young age. Well, what happens is they're not going outside anymore. Those stories are being lost. The storytelling is being lost because our life, it revolves around our bedroom. I mean, even now, I have two daughters. One's 20, one's
especially now.
17. Yeah, the 17-year-old's always in her room,
Mhm,
and they have TVs. They never turn their TVs on. They're on TikTok watching videos, and you're like, get out, get some sunlight, get some. I understand my dad now. What are you doing in the house? Get outside and play, boy. What are you doing? He would get mad if we came home and watching TV. He'd say, go play with your friends. So I think
yeah.
I'm that guy now. Like, go play with your friends. Call your friend up. Go to the park. Get some fresh air. Get out of here. This place. You know,
Mhm,
so I definitely think the storytelling was better in the 80s because we were the last generation that still had that. That still got. I mean, it was we the Sandlot, for example. That was us growing up. The Sandlot, playing ball in the
mhm,
in the park down the street. It wasn't. We weren't a team. We were just a bunch of guys from the neighborhood playing ball, and we would pick teams. And so I think that that's what's great about these movies, is it still had that innocence of the 80s, and it still and it made us dream and made us think, but it was still kind of raw.
mhm.
So it's pretty awesome.
And it's an interesting contrast because well, the reality that they imagine in 2015, it's different from it is obviously different for from what we actually lived in 2015 and today,
Hmm.
and it's, well, for obvious reasons, right? But not just because of the flying cars, but
Yeah,
also because I believe that no one could have imagined something like what we are living today in the 80s,
yeah,
because it was very different, the way that we socialized. And yeah, we had a little glimpse when the little kid
mhm.
said that if you had to use your hands to play a video game, then
You're just a childish thing, you know.
yes,
Well, that's like a kid toy. Yeah.
mhm, yeah, like a kid toy. And they weren't very far from reality, because, well, now we have you know uh the VR, the virtual
Hmm.
reality, and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the
uh
holographic shark. That shark that
yes,
went.
yes,
I mean, Tupac did a concert as a hologram. I mean, that was pretty cool. That was like
yeah,
2000 or something. At Coachella or something. It was like 2000, 2000
yeah.
something. Tupac shows up as a hologram. So I mean, there's some things to it. There's some truth to the stuff. We still don't have hoverboards. We don't have flying cars, and flying cars is a little tough to imagine. I mean, could you
Hmm.
imagine the car accidents we would have?
Oh
you
my
know,
goodness, no.
it's hard enough not getting into a car accident on the
Hmm.
road. So I can see why flying cars will take a while, although they're trying to make flying more accessible, to
Hmm.
regular people. So I think that part of it's cool.
Hmm.
But it wasn't that far off. I mean, some of the styles are still not there, but they're dehydrating pizzas or rehydrating pizzas, all that kind of stuff. I mean, we
Yeah.
microwave everything. So we don't have fax machines anymore. Ha, you know, because he gets the
Yeah,
faxes where it says you're fired. Remember?
that one was
But
adorable to see. Yeah, that one was
yeah,
adorable. Hmm.
yeah, fax machines in 2015, and then where the windows were actually LED screens. Now that's something that we see.
Uh-huh.
Where they use. I was in Chicago a few weeks ago doing some shows, and they had LED screens in front of the doors at the Walgreens.
Hmm.
So they had a LED screen with all the beverages. And then you open the door, and those beverages were right there. And I was going like, why not just put glass? Why do you have an LED screen? But it's like the thing is like, hey, it looks nice and it looks crisp, and that's what with the movie they could change the weather, they could change the scenery. I mean,
Uh-huh.
it's it, that. I mean, that's reality. We can do
Hmm.
that now.
Yeah. Okay. And one final thing that I would like to mention is that, uh you know, there are many, many time traveling stories out there, and each of them has their own reality, their own rules.
Hmm.
And one of the differences, and one of the most iconic things about this movie is how things change in front of your eyes if you do something that changes the
Yeah,
future.
where his fingers start to. You can
Yeah.
when he's seeing himself his feet disappear when he's playing
Uh-huh.
Johnny B. Good. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, the photographs
Yeah.
changing, that is pretty cool to watch. But I mean, that is one of those are one of the things that are most unbelievable, but are most iconic of the movie.
Yes.
Because in other kind of stories, for example in Dark, every single aspect of what is going on now has to do with something in the past.
Hmm.
But if there, for example, someone from the future traveled to the past, there is no way to change the future. It just happened in a circle that
Hmm.
can be changed, that can be broken. And in Back to the Future, you can actually change the events. Um, and some other stories, you change an event, but then when you back, come back, quote unquote,
Hmm.
to your time, it is not your time anymore. It's an alternate reality.
Reality. Yes.
Pretty much like what we see here in Back to the Future, but the the difference is that in those other stories there are two parallel worlds now.
Hmm.
There are not they're not the same universe that just changed. It's just a whole other reality, and in parallel you have that other reality where you came from.
Yes.
And those differences are interesting to watch, and in different time traveling stories.
Which one do you believe?
Well, for starters, I don't believe that time travel would be possible, because of all the troubles or all the issues that this could take place, right? For
Okay, this
example.
conversation is over. That's
No, I
strike
mean, I
two,
mean, I
young lady.
love, I love time traveling stories. I made a whole video with Fofo and Pollo about time traveling stories.
Yeah.
We actually mentioned Back to the Future as well, but oh my goodness, oh yeah, we're back.
Yeah.
I believe that our connection had a little issue, but yeah, we're back. But yeah, I don't believe that it would be possible. But
Hmm.
if it would be possible, I think it would be more like in dark, that
And see, and I
nothing can
think
be
it's more.
changed.
Yeah, I think it's more lineal. You know,
Mm-hmm.
um, I do believe that if your mom had had a headache the day that your dad was horny, you wouldn't be here. It'd be somebody else. You know,
Uh-huh.
it would be a totally different person. So it has to happen exactly the way it happened for it to be here. And I believe that. I believe that
Mm-hmm.
had my dad gotten drunk the night I was conceived, I wouldn't be here. You
Mm-hmm.
know, he had to romance my mom at the exact time that he did and the way that he did, whatever that may be, for it to be me, this guy, right? And that's mind-boggling to me. And if you think about it, their parents had to hook up at the exact same time that they
Mm-hmm.
hooked up, and it had to be that particular night, that particular load
Mm-hmm.
for it to be them. And so then
Yeah.
you start to look back and you go, and what about their parents? So you start to say, there's like a point in time where 64 people had to do exactly the same thing they did
Mm-hmm.
for you to exist. That's that's incredible. And
Yeah.
I don't think the future is written. I don't think I could deal with that. I don't think
Yeah.
mentally I could deal with the fact that the future is written for you, that you have no say, or you have no ability to affect your life in a good way or a bad way from here on out. I think that that's the beauty of life, is that you can actually do something to better yourself. Because if not, then we're all kind of screwed. What are we doing?
Mm-hmm.
Why even try? If it's already written, if it's a circle, why even try?
Mm-hmm.
But but if we do something today, it'll have an effect on us in the future that I can deal with. That I
Yeah,
can deal with
that
up
that
here.
is pretty much the concept with that. I mean, every action that you do, it will affect the future in many ways. But yeah, we actually have a time traveler here.
It's
Peter
tomorrow
is
here in
visiting us.
Ireland.
Yeah, Peter is watching us from tomorrow.
Nice.
It's because he's in Ireland.
What part of Ireland? Southern or northern?
Okay, we're gonna have to wait for his answer. But oh
Yeah.
my goodness, it's super late there. Thank you so much for for watching,
You're watching.
for
Yeah.
staying with us. I appreciate that very much. But I think you should go. You should go get some rest. I don't want to affect your health. But yeah. Oh, this comment is interesting. The most unbelievable thing about of Back to the Future is that they were in 2015 and no one bought Bitcoin. I wish I could
Did it
travel
even
back to
exist
live.
in 2015? Did Bitcoin exist in 2015?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know anything about that, so I'm not the person to ask that.
Yeah,
Oh, Feather is from the south on the west coast of Ireland.
nice,
Nice. Oh, they were invented in 2008, Bitcoin. So now
cool.
now we have an answer. Well,
Yeah,
it would have been difficult for them to imagine Bitcoin back in 1985. Yeah,
yeah.
well, some some things were true, were accurate, some weren't. But well, that's the thing when you that's the thing when you imagine things in the future.
Hmm.
So yeah. Okay, Sam, we have reached the end
All
of our
right.
yeah,
Well,
I don't
we
know.
can go back. We can go back to the beginning of this podcast and start over.
Mhm.
Got the DeLorean out back. No, I'm just kidding. But well, thank you for thank you
Just
for
find
having
something
me.
to power your flux capacitor and you're set.
Yeah, it's 1.21 gigawatts. But yeah, no, I appreciate you having me on the show. I enjoyed it. Speaking of one of my favorite topics, well, I don't
Mhm.
know if it's my favorite topic, but it's one of my favorite movies for sure. Back to
Mhm.
the Future, and I like that Back to the Future series, the trilogy, Goonies, Indiana
Mhm.
Jones, a lot of the movies, the Temple of Doom, and all that stuff. That was
Mhm.
awesome back then. You know, not a big Star Wars fan. I know a lot of people were like, "Oh, what?" But um, Star Wars was
Uh,
a '70s thing. My
mhm.
parents weren't into it, so I never really watched it till I was older. And then when I watched it, I was like, well, I don't get it. But like The Godfather, if you want to talk about The Godfather next, we can do that.
All
But
right. Let's do that. All right. All
we'll,
right.
we'll yeah,
I'm
we'll
gonna
keep
have
it
to
going. But
rewatch them though.
yeah, I mean, we can talk about The Godfather. That's a very uh, interesting
Mhm.
trilogy for me. But yeah, thank you for having me on the show. Appreciate it.
Okay, Sam. What is next on your podcast, on your stand-up shows and the things that you do?
Well, I shoot a podcast once a week, and our English episode comes out on Tuesdays, and our Spanish episode comes out on Fridays. So that will always be coming up every single week. We're almost to the 100th episode. I know that it's kind of tricky because it says 47 or 46 on my thing, but that's 46 in Spanish and 46 in English. So
Hmm.
we're almost to the 100th episode, which is pretty exciting. We're almost to the 1 year anniversary, which is pretty exciting.
Nice.
We're thinking of some stuff to do with the podcast for the 1 year anniversary. I know that Leyendas Legendarias and Que Fue de Ellos, we just did a live. That I'm not gonna do anything that drastic, but I do want to do something for my 1 year anniversary as Está Pegado podcast, and
Hmm.
hopefully they don't get me a cake shaped like a toilet or something, because it's not the point of the podcast. But no, I do look forward to that.
Hmm.
I'm on tour right now with some of my buddies in the U.S. I have a buddy named Polar Bear, John Polar Bear Gonzalez. He's actually a TikToker. He's got about 1 million subscribers, more or less, and he's been a stand-up comic for almost 10 years. So before TikTok was a thing, we were all doing stand-up together, and now that he became TikTok famous, well, we're going on tour. So um, we just finished up doing the Midwest, and I think we're going to do another Midwest tour here pretty soon. So I have that coming up, and then as the market opens up in Mexico, I'm supposed to start doing some shows in Mexico. I just got back from Mexico City like 3 weeks ago, so I'm hoping to get working again in Mexico City doing some shows. That's what's going on. That's what I got cooking.
That's pretty nice. So be sure to follow Sam
Yeah,
on his social profiles.
media. Yeah.
That's his
That's it. Tu amigo
yeah,
Sam.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
You
Amigo
know,
Sam, you can find him there.
yeah, I used to be Sam Butler comedy, but then when I started working with a lot of the Spanish shows, nobody would remember my name, so I
Mm-hmm.
had to change it to Tu amigo Sam. I thought that that was a pretty accurate way to describe myself. I just want to be your buddy, you know. So, but now everybody's like El Tío Sam, which I'm like, that's not what I was going for. But okay, and they're like,
Yeah,
Cambia El
that's
Tío
the
Sam, you know?
thing. Yeah, that's a thing in that's a
Yeah,
thing in Mexico and Mexican fandom.
yeah.
That every time you follow someone or you like their what they're doing and their content making, you call them uncle or aunt.
I thought it's
And
because I'm old, you know.
well,
I thought it was
yeah,
like he's too old to be like hot and sexy Sam. We're just gonna call him as Tío Sam. That's what we're gonna call him. He's
yeah,
the uncle,
it does
you
have something
know.
to do with age. It does have
Yeah,
something to do with age because I haven't seen that any young, uh, any young famous TikToker or
let's
Instagrammer or
call him Tío.
whatever.
Yeah,
Then no, they don't call him. They don't call them Tio or Tia. But
yeah,
yeah, it does have something to do with age. In
yeah. If they
fact,
call you Tío or Tia, they're like, yeah, you're too old, buddy. Yeah,
I got
you
my
you.
first Tia. I got my first Tia
Oh,
Cecilia recently,
it's
and I
because
was like,
you know what a
wow.
flux capacitor is. That's the problem.
Yeah,
Yeah,
capacitor is. So now I'm old enough to be a tia,
Tia.
I
They're like,
feel like
Tío.
I am a
Yeah.
tia.
And I know that Theo is a term of endearment. I'm not knocking it. I appreciate the term of endearment.
Yeah,
Theo, I think it's awesome, you know. But it's a reality check that not young anymore. Not a young guy anymore. You know, I'm the
all
older
good.
dude, but it's cool.
Achievement unlocked. Okay, well,
Yeah.
you can follow Sam on his social, so you can so you know if he's going to be in your town someday.
Yeah.
So
That's
yeah,
also my YouTube channel. My
mhm.
YouTube channel is Tu Amigo Sam as well.
Yeah.
That's where
Actually,
my
you will find those links on the description of this video.
yeah.
Okay, so thank you all for watching. I appreciate I appreciate you being here on live, and also your views later and not live. And also I thank you and I appreciate your follow. And if you are listening on your favorite podcast platform, the one that you used, and thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your subscription and your likes. And you can find me in my social as at Geeksterilia. You can also find those links on the description of this channel. And I invite you to join our Facebook group, which you can also find in the description of this channel, where we can talk about, well, we can continue this kind of conversations. We can share memes, we can share new content that you would like us to discuss next. And well, we have reached the end of the streaming. Again, thank you so much, and may the force be with you.
We'll see y'all later.